The morning the whole town mocked him, Wyatt Mercer kept completely quiet. He stood on that auction field, raising his hand 6 times for rusted-out machines everyone else ignored. Paid $14,200 for the lot, walking to his truck while the crowd just laughed. Eleanor Vance made sure her judgment echoed across the field. To them, he had just wasted his entire life savings on junk. The locals by the fence completely agreed. Every single one of them looked at those broken tractors and saw nothing but worthless scrap metal. Average minds rarely bother to look past the rust. Stick with me here. What you and I are about to uncover behind those tractors will change how you view potential. Samuel Grant just watched him leave. The seasoned auctioneer had managed Grant and Associates for 31 years, working the Midwest circuit of distressed farm liquidations and estate sales, learning to read people over time. He developed a sharp instinct for the difference between a fool losing money and a quiet visionary who simply did not want anyone else to catch on. Samuel had actually met Wyatt Mercer twice before. Once at a trade conference in Ames 4 years back, and again at a private land auction over in Polk County, where Wyatt snagged property under an LLC without a single person recognizing him. The wise man kept that little secret strictly to himself on the auction floor that morning. He simply called the next lot and moved right along with that unhurried professionalism that had carried him through 3 decades of blind misfortune. Wyatt quietly loaded up those tractors. Over 2 long days using his tow rig and a flatbed borrowed from a local guy named Dale, who ran a salvage yard 1 county over and smartly knew better than to ask any questions. While driving back home from his second heavy trip, Wyatt pulled into Miller's Hardware on the edge of town, buying up specialty-grade bolts, 2 heavy rolls of industrial wiring, and rare hydraulic line fittings the cashier had to hunt down in the back catalog because average folks had not needed them in 3 long years. She stared at the receipt, giving him that specific look the entire town of Harlow Creek was currently throwing his way. A mix of pure confusion and pity, mostly leaning heavily toward pity. He just thanked her, grabbing his heavy bags, and tossed them in his truck cab without saying a word, because true visionaries rarely explain themselves. Plus, explaining his plan meant starting right at the beginning. And tracing that hidden potential was not something Harlow Creek was ready for. By Sunday morning, the rumor about those 6 rusty tractors had completely circled the entire town. It drifted right through Sycamore Cup during the early morning coffee rush. Hit the First Baptist lot right between the 8:30 and 10 o'clock Sunday services. Lingered for a while in the busy parking lot of Vance and Sons Hardware, where ordinary guys leaned on their trucks, failing entirely to see his hidden vision, before finally landing right in the corner booth of the famous Harlow Creek Diner, where Eleanor Vance complained to 2 Commerce Board members over a cold plate of eggs she never even planned to touch. Eleanor really spun the tale perfectly. She had a real talent for framing facts, presenting small details so her narrow-minded conclusion felt totally obvious and impossible to argue with, even when she missed the real value completely. Every single time she told it, she stripped away the vision, replacing it with a hard, judgmental certainty about his supposed failure. You and I both know how gossip works when the crowd already decided someone is a fool. Right when Diana Brooks finally arrived, taking the very next table with her notebook and a simple black coffee. You and I know how ordinary minds work. The diner ruled it a failure. 3 years ago, Wyatt Mercer walked away from a corporate Chicago job. Most saw that as a step backward. He overpaid for his family's farm, or so the locals thought, and supposedly kept making terrible financial choices, losing his wife 4 short years ago. That heavy loss obviously broke something in him that never fully healed. Everyone felt pity for him, but short-sighted people rarely bother to look any closer. Waitress Diana wrote it down, WM1 14 grand 6 tractors. Why? She underlined the word, not as a simple question. She sensed hidden value here. It wasn't just idle curiosity. Her sharp instinct refused to let the strange math go. She was still staring at that odd investment when a stranger in a sharp jacket and pristine shoes walked in, took a seat at the counter, and ordered black coffee. This guy clearly never touched a rusty tractor or worked the fields in his life. And in an old farming town where agriculture dictates absolutely every single thing you do, that was a massive red flag. He carried the calm confidence of a strategic buyer scouting targets, not a tourist. He quietly scanned the room, gathering data and evaluating every single person. Diana instinctively mentally filed his face away without realizing why. The man was Carter Voss, 52 years old, running a sharp real estate firm out of Des Moines with 12 staff and 3 massive regional projects. He had been quietly evaluating this town's raw potential for 6 months, scanning tax records, spatial land data, and future infrastructure plans. He verified the agricultural yields before finally deciding to inspect the site in person. His target was 340 acres of land in the northern corridor of the E. County. It belonged to Wyatt Mercer and sat perfectly centered on a planned logistics hub. His development firm partnered with a major distribution network, desperate for a ground hub between Des Moines and Cedar Rapids. The county foolishly assessed the dirt at $400,000. Carter came fully prepared to offer significantly more cash. He also planned to apply massive financial pressure, assuming a struggling guy in Wyatt Mercer's position. A single father running a modest farm on property that was draining his bank account way too fast. Would gladly take the easy buyout, rather than keep fighting a losing battle. Here's what you and I realize. The locals completely missed the true underlying value of that land north of Elm Creek. From the main road, the property looked like ordinary, worthless dirt. Rusty wire fencing running along the shoulder. A cheap gravel path cutting through brush toward a rundown farmhouse desperate for fresh paint. And past that, ordinary fields just cycling through the typical agricultural seasons. To an amateur eye, nothing separated this plot from the dozens of struggling farms along that exact same highway stretch. But this wasn't an accident, and it wasn't laziness. It was a brilliant, deliberate strategy Wyatt planned early on. He wasn't hiding his massive assets just for fun. He simply understood that revealing future equity requires an audience smart enough to see it. And he knew damn well these local townspeople lacked the vision to comprehend it. He grew up alongside these exact people. He knew they only judged the rust on top, completely blind to the gold underneath. Wyatt figured out years ago that doing the actual work was a far better use of his energy than trying to convince short-sighted people of a vision they couldn't grasp yet. The real magic happened in the backyard workshop. Those 6 rusty machines arrived slowly over 4 quiet days. It was a massive space, the only building Wyatt had heavily upgraded during his very first year back home. Bright LED lights stretched across the entire ceiling. Smooth concrete floors featured custom drainage channels along the walls. A massive workbench spanned the room, packed with perfectly organized tools waiting to unlock hidden value. 2 laptop mounts sat beside trays of carefully sorted parts. 3 screens displayed live data from a sensor network tracking the entire property outside. As that final rusted tractor arrived on a Tuesday evening, Wyatt finally pulled the heavy doors shut. You and I might just see junk, but standing there he saw 6 machines lined up perfectly. He felt the deep satisfaction of a man ready to start a project completely invisible to ordinary eyes. A grand design that the locals couldn't even begin to comprehend. The front row held a John Deere KCH and Massey Ferguson. Pulled from a foreclosed Lynn County farm, their engines were completely shot and worthless. But Wyatt knew exactly what they were before bidding. What he saw instead. After spending 300 hours over 5 months analyzing that Cedar Falls auction list, he recognized the raw capability hiding inside them. He knew their hydraulic systems were totally rock solid. The PTO shafts could easily be fully restored. Most importantly, their frames possessed the exact geometry required for the custom hardware he had already designed and started building long before winning the bids. He didn't see broken old tractors. They were valuable modular components wrapped in steel, waiting to be stripped and reborn. That second row held an older generation John Deere 4040. A Ford 8N from dry storage, demanding far less repair than its battered paint job led fools to believe. Plus a late-model machine. A utility case with a hydraulic bug that was incredibly cheap and simple to actually fix. These engines had massive potential to run again with just a little smart, sequenced maintenance. 3 machines served as parts donors. 3 others would form the mechanical heart of an innovation that top agricultural engineering magazines were already tracking. even while Harlow Creek remained completely blind. He assessed the scrap for 2 weeks, launching into custom fabrication by the third. He ground away after dark, because daylight hours were consumed by the endless chores of managing the larger farm ecosystem. A lingering memory always surfaced in the back of his mind during those late, quiet nights. It wasn't a painful thought anymore, just a steady truth that surfaced whenever he was deep in work. It was Laura back in their Chicago apartment, sitting beside a sprawling map of the Iowa county spread across their kitchen table. She had studied the property numbers, turned to him, and said something profound. With that rare, unshakable trust that only comes when someone looks past immediate doubt to see real possibility. "I don't fully understand what you see out there, Wyatt, but I trust that you see it." Once was enough. He never needed to hear those words again. Yet the echo remained, driving him forward at 2 a.m. inside that shop. You and I know better, but that night, the whole town was already mocking his $14,000 scrap purchase. Meanwhile, Wyatt calmly opened a pivotal email that had been sitting unread for 11 days. The email came from a firm called Agricor Solutions, based out in Minneapolis. A smart farming tech company holding serious weight in the precision agriculture space. They had been watching the open sensor data pouring out of the county environmental monitoring grid for over a year, and they spotted patterns. Patterns pointing to a massive, pro-level precision ag network running quietly through the northern Cedar County corridor. They wanted to come down and see it. If the data checked out, they were ready to sit down and talk strategic partnership. Wyatt read it twice, shut the laptop, and went right back to fitting a hydraulic line on that old John Deere frame. He would reply to them, just not tonight. True vision requires patience. There was a sequence and the timing wasn't right. Carter Voss tracked Wyatt down at Sycamore Cup one Tuesday, sliding into the booth totally uninvited. He introduced himself with that slick, practiced charm of a guy who flips cheap assets in 100 different towns. A guy who figured out that fake bluntness often gets mistaken for genuine respect. He pitched his real estate firm vaguely. He sketched out a development deal, carefully hiding its real scale and its link to the northern corridor. He offered $1,200,000 for the 340 main acres, almost triple the current paper valuation, adding that this fat offer, while very generous, had a fast expiration date. He spun it like a massive favor, acting as if someone else might snatch it. He talked for about 4 flat minutes, barely breathing. When he finally stopped, Wyatt set down his coffee mug, looked right into Carter's eyes with a blank, polite stare that gave away absolutely nothing, and simply said, "No, thank you." Carter sat there, waiting for the counteroffer he could use to start negotiating. So he pivoted to Plan B, claiming the dirt was commercially dead and lacking real scale, that the whole area was going through a painful economic transition. "Let's step back here. You and I know his game." Carter claimed his project would spike everyone's property values, and he warned Wyatt to seriously reconsider what his true goals were before walking away from a buyout like this. Wyatt absorbed this whole second pitch with the exact same unreadable look on his face. Then he calmly said, "I appreciate the offer," got up, grabbed his jacket, and walked away. Carter just sat there in the dead quiet of the cafe, staring blankly at the door. He started doing that dark math corporate developers do, when their shiny money fails to blind someone who sees the bigger picture. That night he drove out to Vance & Sons after hours, where Eleanor unlocked the side door for him. What happened between them over those next 40 minutes wasn't some dramatic cinematic conspiracy. No blueprints tossed on tables, no direct, dirty orders spoken aloud. They never named their endgame out loud. We've all seen this before, just 2 short-sighted people recognizing a mutually beneficial, greedy interest. And they chose to pull the strings through the safe, quiet language of hints. Carter laid out his land grab up north, still hiding the logistics hub's massive future potential. He casually dropped a hint that getting the local community stirred up, pushing zoning complaints and asking loud questions about operational permits. A formal inspection notice usually had a funny way in his experience of making owners sell out before they could ever realize the true long-term value themselves. He hinted that a finished real estate development up north could create an economic anchor, bringing massive future profits to established local suppliers. like farming retail stores. Eleanor never asked him to spell out the future profits for Vance and Sons. She had operated in this tiny local market for long enough to calculate that hidden upside herself. She mentioned to Carter that folks in town were already asking serious questions about the real value being built on the Mercer land, demanding strict official answers about it. She truly believed she wasn't entirely wrong when she justified it. Yet she fully grasped exactly how this kind of formal, bureaucratic pressure could force a cheap sale, and she stayed entirely quiet about it. Picture this. Diana Brooks strolled past Vance and Sons around 8:45 that night, heading home from a local board meeting nearby. Through the window, she noticed Eleanor and the guy from the diner plotting near the back of the dark showroom. She jotted the exact time in her notebook and kept moving. Later at home, she finally looked up Carter Voss online. A Des Moines real estate firm, 12 employees. 3 active commercial zoning projects across Iowa stuck in permitting. She couldn't yet see the massive potential hidden right there in Harlow Creek. She simply filed the notes away and slept. But the gut feeling to track it was the same instinct keeping her uncovering hidden stories for 6 years. The official zoning notice hit Wyatt's mailbox that Wednesday via certified mail straight from the Harlow Creek Zoning and Commerce Board. It claimed strict concerns over unapproved changes to agricultural land, questioning if his brilliant subsurface infrastructure actually fit their outdated surface-level county agricultural zoning laws, and demanded a full property inspection within 14 days. Eleanor Vance signed the threatening letter herself as the board chair. It was drafted in that fake, polite tone of bureaucratic concern, the kind you can hardly fight, masking their true intent to steal his hard-earned future value, only stating the safest legal details on the paper. Wyatt studied the letter over morning coffee at his table, his mug cooling while dim morning light spilled through the kitchen window. "You and I know true visionaries don't panic." He read it twice, placing it flat, not hidden, not tossed aside. Just flat, a minor obstacle he would handle on his own terms, protecting his grand vision when he was ready. His son Marcus wandered downstairs a few minutes later, creeping through the room with that specific teenage silence they learn when the grown-ups around them are carrying the weight of massive hidden risks. 16 and tall, he was already carrying himself with the exact same solid confidence as his father, that grounded posture of someone who already sees their own worth without needing the world's applause. The boy spotted the official warning. He looked right at Wyatt. "Dad," he said, fighting to keep his voice totally steady. "They aren't going to force us out of here, are they?" Wyatt looked at his son, seeing right past the brave face to the deep strength taking root underneath. He hid the mounting pressure perfectly. When you see the real potential, you just say, without hesitation, "No, we are not leaving." Marcus held his dad's gaze, trusting the vision, and nodded. He poured himself some coffee and headed right back upstairs. The plan was firmly set. That was the end of it. That evening, Wyatt drafted a brief, direct reply to AgriCorps Solutions, locking in a site visit 3 weeks out. He attached a 12-page operational breakdown of the Mercer Precision A system. Then he closed with his lawyer's contact details for the early document review. He hit send at 7:43, then called Jonathan Reed in Chicago at 8:15. Reed was the attorney who handled the big corporate contracts for Wyatt back in his Agristar days, and he completely understood the exact ways corporate developers played the game in rural Midwest land markets. Wyatt gave him Carter Voss's name, his firm, and a clear breakdown of exactly what went down at that coffee shop. Reed stayed quiet for a second, then finally said, "I have seen that exact operation before down in Jasper County. Send me every single thing you have on his Cedar County filings. Any public statements, and the conversation just as you remember it." Wyatt said he absolutely would. He hung up, staring out at the dark fields. Out there, blinking sensor lights pulsed like a steady heartbeat of pure, untapped potential across 800 acres. You and I both know when you hold true value, panic disappears. He was simply done letting this game move at somebody else's slow pace. Eleanor's big community meeting kicked off that Thursday night in the Faun main hall, drawing about 40 locals who showed up at the meeting partly out of real civic worry, and partly because they couldn't see the vision behind Wyatt Mercer's auction purchase. Eleanor tried to frame it as a local transparency initiative, an open conversation about land use choices impacting everyone across the northern farming corridor. The crowd's questions were honest, but totally blind to the real potential. What exactly was he building out there? Did he have the right permits? Were there any environmental risks that should worry the neighboring farms? Why was none of this shared through the usual, everyday channels? Eleanor gave zero answers, simply because she had absolutely none to offer. Instead, she just gave a stage to the town's unease, which was very real, and the illusion that officials were paying attention, playing right into the short-sighted trap Carter Voss had set up. That meeting dragged for an hour and ended with zero solutions, leaving everyone slightly more anxious than when they first walked through the doors. Wyatt, of course, was nowhere near that blind room. He was in his shop wiring high-tech GPS housing onto the rusted chassis of his fourth tractor. His hands tightened those bracket bolts with the steady rhythm of a builder who was already calculating 3 massive steps ahead of everyone else. Journalist Diana Brooks had covered the Harlow Creek area for 6 years, developing a very sharp and reliable instinct for spotting the difference between surface-level gossip and the rare stories where massive hidden value was waiting just out of plain sight. At first, the Wyatt Mercer farm story seemed like just another surface-level local drama. A farmer makes an investment that looks completely worthless on paper. The town gossips, you write a soft human interest piece, and you quickly move on. Let's look closer. She wrote dozens like that, but this time, she sensed the massive hidden upside. A quiet friction between the rusty surface level and a brilliant, calculated long game she couldn't quite name yet. And after that blind community meeting, you and I know surface details deceive. That meeting left her wanting real answers. Everyone else in that room was completely blind to the potential taking shape. She went right back to square one, pulling the hidden thread from the auction nobody else noticed. She headed straight to the county recorder. That Friday morning, she pulled the entire property index for the northern farming and housing corridor. Tracing the hidden connections took her 2 solid hours. When those 120 minutes finally passed, she sat dead quiet at that desk, just staring before writing a single word. Everyone knew Wyatt Mercer owned 340 acres, but 3 quiet shell companies registered in Iowa. Mercer Land Holdings, Cedar Line A, and North Track Properties hid 6 more land parcels in that exact corridor, all snatched up over the last 3 years. On paper, they just looked like completely ordinary, low-value farm sales. Not one sparked local gossip. Zero press coverage, because average eyes never see value in quiet, simple transactions. Let's look closer. These connected tracts equaled almost 1,800 acres. Diana jotted that massive number down, sitting there letting the hidden scale sink in before making calls. By the next afternoon, she tracked down Samuel Grant behind the old auction yard. His tiny office was absolutely buried in paperwork. It overlooked an empty dirt lot with a rusted filing cabinet shoved against the back wall, organized in a chaotic way only someone like Samuel could grasp. She asked him flat out if he knew Wyatt Mercer before that dusty auction day. Samuel just watched her with the deep, quiet patience of a man who sees the bigger picture, waiting for someone sharp enough to finally ask the right question without forcing it. He spoke softly, giving nothing away. "Do you know what those 6 tractors are worth, if you know how to look at them?" He completely ignored her actual question. Standing up, he pulled an 18-month-old copy of Midwest Ag Intelligence from the second drawer of his beat-up cabinet. He dropped the closed magazine right on the desk in front of her. Then he just sat back and sipped his tea. Page 3. The title read Mercer Precision Ag, the Quiet Revolution Happening in Iowa's Heartland. Underneath sat a high-altitude drone shot of those 1,800 acres. You could see sensor grids mapped out like perfect math. Smart water pipes carved flawless parallel lines straight across the dirt, and 3 upgraded tractors driving in perfect harmony along digital paths. Empty cabs, not a single human being anywhere in the shot. Just 3 heavy machines functioning in pure, robotic order. That land didn't look like a failing, rusty little farm. It looked like the massive, silent future of agriculture. It was 2,400 words long. Diana absorbed every single detail right there, while the old man casually drank tea and stared out the glass. Watching the bare dirt lot acting like their chat was completely done, and the hidden potential was finally unfolding perfectly on schedule. Finishing up, she placed the magazine down, said thanks, and walked to her car. "You and I finally see it." From her car she called, "Hold Thursday's columns." "I found something." She paused. The rest of them completely missed it. You and I know visionaries face scrutiny. That inspection morning was crisp, typical late May in Iowa after heavy rain. The air held that sharp freshness, the kind signaling real change. It felt like long patience paying off, like hidden potential finally getting the green light to reveal itself. Eleanor Vance pulled up to the gate. The Mercer property at 9 a.m. She drove a county vehicle, dragging two short-sighted zoning board members along. Carter Voss pulled in 2 minutes later, driving his own car. A shiny black sedan that looked ridiculously clean out here on the county roads. They introduced him to the board as some regional agricultural land use expert, someone whose rural development knowledge of zoning laws supposedly would, Eleanor claimed, help them accurately evaluate the property's true value. The heavy gate was shut tight. They waited silently in the morning chill, just staring blankly at the fence and gravel lane fading into the trees, completely blind to what was building beyond them. Wyatt strolled down the lane on foot, unrushed, wearing his everyday work clothes. Those standard canvas work pants and dark flannel he wore every single morning. The exact same worn boots that people mocked at the equipment auction. He undid the latch and swung it open. He shook hands with Eleanor and the skeptical board members, showing zero hesitation. Not overly warm, not cold, just a firm, confident greeting between equals. He shook Carter's hand last. Wyatt held the so-called expert's gaze just a fraction longer than normal. Carter stared right back. He had that polished calm of a corporate guy used to stepping into places where locals clearly didn't want him, and knew how to fake absolute certainty. Wyatt completely ignored the consultant's presence. He simply pivoted up the lane, letting the clueless inspection crew follow. The group rounded the final cluster of low trees at the lane's curve. Then the entire massive operation revealed itself all at once. Here's where you and I would smile. What they saw shattered every poor assumption they held. Eleanor froze instantly. She stood at the edge of the sprawling agtech operation. Within seconds it finally hit her. She had judged this man's entire potential based purely on the scrap metal he started with. The entire committee faced 1,800 acres of highly profitable, precision-managed farmland. The sheer scale of it, it was organized, fully operational, and brilliantly designed. Nothing like their mental image of a broke single dad hopelessly burning through his cash on dead tractors. The massive gap between myth and reality was shocking. Silver sensor poles sprouted perfectly across the fields, mapping future crop yields, topped with advanced multi-array monitors that gleamed sharply in the morning sunlight. A modern irrigation network ran, as low-profile hoses hugging the crop margins. They linked to a smart buried grid, proving Wyatt saw the underlying geometry everyone else missed. The flawless calculated spacing that automated machines create when programmed by someone who truly understands efficiency. Out east, 3 restored tractors drove perfect parallel lines with the slow, deliberate focus of high-tech automated equipment. Empty cabs, dead quiet engines from this far back. Just those 3 upcycled rusty hulls dominating the morning in flawlessly programmed, profitable geometric order. Way out back sat an incredibly valuable, massive commercial greenhouse. 12,000 square feet minimum. It hugged a sleek operations hub, dark front glass, and a heavy satellite array up top. Now tell me who the real visionary is. Carter Voss said absolutely nothing. He went perfectly still, the exact way you and I see small minds freeze when they are rerunning the math, realizing the hidden potential was always there. Wyatt guided the doubters inside his operations hub through the side door. Just 800 square feet, cool, softly lit, yet packed with immense potential. 24 glowing screens lined the north wall, revealing the farm's true hidden heartbeat. Weather overlays, GPS equipment trackers, and inventory metrics showing pure, untapped agricultural wealth. Plus an interface pulling hundreds of hidden data points every single minute from the entire property. A long table anchored the very center of the room. 2 workstations humming quietly, beside a color printer still warm from morning production. Over on the east wall, Binders and equipment specs sat with the methodical precision of a focused visionary who has quietly built his system for years, knowing exactly where his most valuable assets were buried. Wyatt approached that center table, picking up a simple blue folder. He had placed it there long before these blind inspectors ever arrived. He opened the file, turning it toward them. He never handed it directly to a short-sighted man like Carter. He laid the proof down. Let's look at this hidden value together, shall we? Page 1. The State Department of Agriculture's official permit for innovation and land use. Secured 23 months ago, fully signed by every single county and state official. Page 2 featured the Federal Environmental Protection Agency. Complete compliance certification for the entire hidden underground sensor network. Pages 3 through 7 held the fully reviewed county zoning approvals. All signed and quietly filed under the previous board chairman's watch. A chairman who worked alongside Eleanor for 14 long months. Files she entirely failed to see before drafting her careless, short-sighted inspection notice. Page 8 showed a flawless third-party safety audit finished 8 months ago, rating the entire operation perfectly satisfactory. Page 9, an independent environmental assessment confirming absolutely zero negative impact anywhere, recommending his visionary methods as a regional model. Page 10 featured one solitary document. Wyatt let the doubters read the whole thing without saying a single word. A massive strategic partnership and licensing agreement between Mercer Precision Agriculture and Agrier Solutions up in Minneapolis. The true initial value sat right on page 1, plainly visible and without ambiguity. $47 million, featuring lucrative extensions for second and third phases based on early performance benchmarks. The room stayed dead silent. They finally saw the real value. Carter Voss was the first to finally speak. He used the careful, desperate words of a man refusing to accept the massive potential sitting right in front of him, muttering about petty corner cases within agricultural modification laws, finding vague ambiguities in the county's classification framework, imagined conflicts regarding the farm's precision, debating superficial designations against the underlying residential zoning layer. He made his blindness sound technical and procedural. The exact bureaucratic noise meant to stall visionary growth, create uncertainty, and drag out the inevitable success. We know true value. Wyatt listened, keeping his confident expression totally closed. You and I know visionaries don't panic. He kept that unhurried Tuesday look. Carter finally wrapped up his second shallow talking point. Wyatt turned to him. The look he gave was pure clarity, the stare of a builder who knew it was time to reveal the empire he had quietly constructed. Every piece of paper there has been legal, permitted, and fully compliant for 2 years, he stated. His tone stayed totally casual, not defensive, not loud. Those documents are yours to copy if you want them. My lawyer's contact info is right on the back page. He paused, then added, I also know about the deal you pitched, Eleanor Vance. No tape of that chat exists, but Jonathan Reed up in Chicago spent 3 solid weeks reviewing your shady Cedar County acquisitions. And frankly, he has a few sharp questions your legal team really needs to answer. I highly recommend returning his call before Friday rolls around. Carter Voss's face completely shifted right then, not fear. Not panic either. It was something much heavier and permanently final. The hollow gaze of a guy who finally realizes the actual massive operation he blindly walked into, entirely unlike the cheap hustle he thought he ran. Carter grabbed his jacket off the chair. Without uttering a single syllable to anyone in the room, he quickly bolted straight for the exit. Wyatt spoke flatly right before Carter crossed the doorway. If you ever plan to do genuine business in this region, the real visionary kind of business, have your firm call Jonathan Reed. We might have something to discuss. Carter vanished without replying. That sedan firing up outside was the very last time anyone in Harlow Creek heard from that short-sighted fool. Let's look at what Eleanor finally noticed by the monitoring wall. She stared at those glowing screens, watching advanced sensor data endlessly scrolling. Tractor location markers instantly updating as the 3 automated machines executed precise turns at the boundary and smoothly started their next pass. A 72-hour weather forecast was already perfectly loaded and seamlessly integrated directly into a smart irrigation algorithm, running flawlessly right there in the Background totally unseen, needing absolutely zero human instruction. She glanced down at that blue folder lying open on the table. Then she watched Wyatt, who quietly stepped over to the far window, gazing out over his hidden masterpiece. He watched his fields with zero ego, no arrogant triumph, no bitter resentment. He didn't put on a show or gloat, even though he had entirely earned it. Eleanor lingered in silence for a minute, then finally walked out entirely speechless. That silent drive back through town became the longest 40 minutes of Eleanor's entire professional career. Thursday morning, Diana Brooks dropped the massive story online. The headline read, "The Farm Nobody Saw." Spanning 3,100 words, it was the Gazette's most expansive local business feature in 4 years. And it proudly displayed the striking aerial photo from a major trade journal right on the front page, alongside a complete breakdown of how he strategically assembled the property using clever LLC structures. The 3-year silent build-out of his incredible sensor and automation network. His exclusive Agrior Solutions partnership, plus the huge total valuation. $100 million, merging land value with installed precision agriculture infrastructure. Guaranteed contracted revenue streams from the Agrior agreement. Plus the brilliant system licensing value established through those strict partnership terms. So what do you and I learn here? Diana confirmed every visionary figure through 3 sources before hitting publish. The truth finally hit. The locals absorbed this news the way people do when their entire perception of hidden value is forced to completely shift. A slow trickle, then an absolute flood. It carried a specific dawn silence that felt completely different from a standard peaceful morning. You and I know that specific quiet. It is the unmistakable sound of short-sighted people realizing they severely misjudged an asset. By late morning, the local diner was packed, buzzing much louder than a typical Thursday crowd. Yet the mood felt deeply uneasy. The chatter carried a very specific, uncomfortable weight today. It was a room full of folks realizing they had all blindly mocked a man's vision, remembering their shared mistake all at once. They remembered the equipment auction, that cruel laughter washing over the crowd. That dismissive remark Eleanor made, just loud enough for everyone. Hindsight changed everything. A brave few openly admitted they completely missed the potential. Some spun excuses to protect their pride, while others simply shut their mouths and kept entirely silent. Carter Voss vanished from Harlow Creek for good. His corporate real estate firm dropped a short press release. It confirmed their big Cedar County logistics deal was dead, citing environmental reviews and new feasibility projections. Jonathan Reed kept totally quiet about what his deep dive into those land acquisition records actually uncovered. He didn't have to speak. Eleanor Vance drove up to the Mercer farm alone that Friday. She left her car at the gate, walking that long gravel driveway entirely by herself. Wyatt was waiting for her right at the front door. He stood by the operations center after the security feeds caught her pulling off the highway. She lingered in that entryway, locking eyes with him, carrying the painful look of someone. A person who rehearsed an apology dozens of times, deciding that a scripted speech was just completely useless now. Knowing the only real way to confess a misjudgment is raw. She simply said, "I was wrong." 3 steady words. No excuses, no deflecting blame, no trying to gloss over her failure to see his vision. Wyatt stared right back, giving her a long moment, truly measuring the massive hit her pride took just to stand there and admit her blindness. That kind of humility is a massive deal in a tiny place like Harlow Creek, where social status is an iron cage you are forced to live inside forever. Finally, he replied, "You can still run a good business here, Eleanor. This town needs people like you if you choose to stand in the right place." She kept her eyes locked on his for a heartbeat, gave a single nod, turned around and marched back down the gravel to her vehicle. Much later that exact afternoon, little Marcus took the rusty truck out to the eastern boundary, finding Wyatt watching the final automated farming run of the long day. The kid parked on the dirt, hopped out and stood shoulder to shoulder with his dad in total silence. He didn't ask a single question, because he already understood perfectly. The boy grew up watching this worthless land transform into an agritech empire, slowly learning to see the true potential his father saw. The open sky had turned, blazing orange and deep red at the horizon, exactly how Iowa skies look in May. We all have moments where fading light and open dirt turn a seemingly ordinary farm into a legendary picture you never want to forget. Those three retrofitted tractors crawled in a perfect row across the distance, tracing their digital paths with intense patience. They rolled with the calm certainty of upgraded machines, perfectly executing his hidden vision without needing a single word. At that distance, the wind swallowed any hint of engine noise. Nobody judging surface value would know, watching from the road, that those rusted tractors were unlocking real wealth. Father and son stood together as the sun went down. Neither spoke a word because they had seen the true potential all along. The folks in Harlow Creek would talk about those 6 old tractors for a very long time after that Thursday passed. They shared the tale with a very specific, eager energy. The kind of eager energy desperately trying to cover up the awkward shame of judging current value and being so completely wrong. They would spin the story to sound like innocent bystanders, pretending they never joined the crowd, laughing at the rusty iron. That is how human memory twists when hidden potential finally reveals itself. You and I know they still missed the real lesson here. The man had not hidden his plans behind closed doors. There was no clever trick or planned distraction going on. What they failed to see was simple, yet a tough pill to swallow. They looked at a tired father, saw a beat-up truck and dirty boots, and judged his current value. And judging by his quiet life in town, they wrongly assumed they understood his absolute maximum potential. They stared right at future wealth but only saw useless rust. They heard quiet work and mistook it for total failure. They watched him stay silent about his vision and wrongly assumed he simply had no vision at all. They had laughed openly that April morning at the Cedar Falls auction. The echo of their foolish laughter haunted every single word of Diana Brooks's newspaper story, and every mile Eleanor drove home that Thursday afternoon. That heavy realization still hung in the air at the local diner on Friday morning, long after folks tried changing the subject. But the awkwardness lingered. You and I know he was never actually mad at them. He never needed those people to see his hidden potential. All he required was dirt, hard labor, and the specific kind of deep patience that builds incredible value in the quiet dark before the world sees it.